I could just ask GPT. Why should I ask Imran for that?
Yeah, good luck. No problem. It's going to take them 10 times more time to do the same thing that I do in 10 minutes. Yeah, because I've been doing it over and over and over and over again for the last 20 years. So I've become really skilled at my craft, right?
There's a lot of lawyers, they do not have a particular niche selected. They do everything, right?
Correct.
So when you say we have to market somebody, then how can they grow their or show their expertise in one area when they claim to be experts in everything?
So look, what I advise clients is that you have to niche down, right? You could have multiple areas of law. They don't know what to do. But if you bring the billing cycle, the pipeline strength, and the cash flow lockup in one place, that's where magic happens.
So most people want to grow their business, but they're trapped inside of it. So they work harder, they stay later and feel more stressed every single day. But what if the secret to growing bigger was actually doing less? So today we are talking to a man who has mastered the art of 30% growth rate. He's lived all over the world from California to Dubai, figuring out exactly how to turn a struggling law firm into a winning machine. So thank you, Imran, for coming to my podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Miss. Appreciate the opportunity.
So basically, Imran, you have talked about a lot of things, but what have you noticed with when you're working with law firms? Is there something they do that feels strange to you and it looks like success on the surface, but it's actually not?
So to borrow a term from a fellow coach that I work with, he uses the term profitless prosperity. So classic symptoms are the lawyers in the firm are working really hard. They're billing day in, day out. Money is coming in, but it leaves the bank account as soon as it hits. So on surface, you're profitable. You're doing really well. But actually, when you deep dig down, you're struggling. They're actually borrowing money to even make payroll sometimes. So the question arises, how can someone be profitable on paper or a firm be profitable on paper? We're struggling deep inside. So then the question is, you got to go do a deep dive and figure out exactly what's working and what's not working. So it generally, I'll give you a brief overview. It generally starts with lead gen, right? So that's the top end of the funnel. That's where work actually comes in. So classic examples that I see, firms come in and say, look, I want more leads, right? I'm like, okay. So when we dig deeper, what we realize is they don't know cost per lead. Okay. They don't know what the conversion time is. So for example, the lead comes in on a Monday, but on average, they get back to the lead on a Tuesday. So there's something called speed to lead, right? So if the lead came in on a Monday and you're getting back to them on a Tuesday, or in certain cases, Wednesday, that's already gone. They've already rung up someone else and gone with another lawyer. So the marketing side is working, but your conversion or monetization of the lead is not working. So that's a different problem that we need to solve.
Right. So you just said that when they're looking at the leads and the marketing side, again, there's a very important thing to see here, and that is exactly what are they marketing. For example, if I see a lot of firms, a lot of lawyers, they do not have a particular niche selected. They do everything, right?
Correct.
So when you say we have to market somebody, then how can they grow their or show their expertise in one area when they claim to be experts in everything?
Yeah. So look, what I advise clients is that you have to niche down, right? You could have multiple areas of law practice, right? But if I'm having a will that I need to get done, I probably will not talk to a family lawyer, right? So what we recommend is that clients have separate landing pages because the riches are in the niches, as they say, right? So you have to niche down at the end of the day. So you may have 3 areas of law that you practice, right? But if you try and bring everything in one place, it convolutes the message, right? You can have it as the main overview, but what I would recommend is you create separate landing pages for each one of those law areas. And you need to know your ideal client profile. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand our client's ICP, right? Because unless your message resonates with your ICP, they're not going to pick up the phone and call you. You need to understand the pain points. You need to understand the words that they use to describe their pain points. That's very important, right? So once you understand that and you get your copy right and you put that in a landing page, conversion multiplies at least 3-folds.
Right, exactly. So this ICP, obviously for different sort of firms, I do understand that for a personal injury firm, speed really matters, right? But then in business law, or people dealing with, assets and protection, they are looking at more B2B customers, right? So they have
Correct.
to have different ICPs. So
Yes.
we're going to go towards the very first one, which is the high velocity firms, which are like either family law or personal injury, immigration in that matter of fact.
Correct.
What do you think is the biggest mistake they do? And that's how they're missing so many opportunities.
Again, they cast their net too wide, right? If you drill down and eventually try to figure out why it's not working, you will come to the realization 9 out of 10 times that they haven't gotten their ICP defined properly. Yeah. I'll give you an example of a family law firm, for instance. They were getting a lot of family matters, but the problem with this particular firm was they were getting parenting matters not backed by property. So single moms coming in, not having enough cash, right? So they would run out of money during the engagement process. So we tweaked a few things. For example, we've got an Excel sheet. We know, for example, in Australia, what the average house prices are, what the average super balances are, right? So we do a geographical mapping of the area they're interested in. And then those ads only show up in the areas where the ICP resides, right? So we don't cast our net that wide. We're very specific in the suburbs that those ads show up. So in this instance, when we changed the suburb geo-targeting, we started getting leads for parenting matters, but backed by property. So all of a sudden, that matter becomes much more profitable for the firm.
Right. So here, there's one thing you said, right? When you cast the net, your leads are coming in. But then there's one more issue where I see a lot of marketers, they blame the, I think, intake team, because they say, okay, obviously, like you said, you're getting leads, but you're not converting them because you
Correct.
are not
That's a
calling
monetization
them.
issue. Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But then the intake team says that the leads that come in are not qualified, and we don't understand that we waste so much time talking to them and realizing that basically they can't even pay our fees, right? So how do you solve that problem? Because I think there's an issue in the middle somewhere that we got to fix.
So, like I said, how can intake people who are taking the calls determine whether or not they can pay? So they have to ask a bunch of questions, right? So what we do is we take those questions and move it to the top of the funnel, right? So we don't let anybody pass through unless they qualify, right? So we reduce the cost per lead. We reduce, for example, non-ICP clients flowing through. So we just move it on the top of the funnel. It's the same qualification criteria. It just moves a step ahead, right? And also, it's important that you train the Google algorithm. I know your company works in that area. So you let Google know, for example, that this was a good lead and this was not a good lead. And over time, the machine learns on its own, right? And over time, you start getting leads that are actually qualified. So the feedback mechanism is very important. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like a switch and you start getting qualified leads. It's a process that you need to, but it's a process that needs to be followed through completely.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see, when if you don't have clean data, every decision that you make in your firm would be kind of skewed from the reality, because the data you're looking at isn't clean. And then if your, I think, CRM or your Google Ads account or your even the case files are not connected somehow, how would you know exactly what we're doing, right? And in fact, the most important thing is that most of people do not even know, like you said initially, that they do not even know what they're making at the end, right? Or what are their projections, right? So now, let's say somebody fixes this, right? Somebody knows, okay, I don't have a lead generation problem because I have a good marketer who's bringing in leads with the correct ICP. I have a good intake team, or I have used a software that basically sends them email, calls them, or whatever. And then you're also sending that clean data back to Google. Now, the problem is that the success at the end still depends on the finances, right? Because obviously,
absolutely.
How would we ensure that these are the cases that I am billing for right now, and in my pipeline, these are the potential cases which are going to come in few weeks or the next month. So how does that work? Would you just identify the problems there?
So basically, now we're in the next step of the process. So we've got our ICP well defined, the algorithms being trained, and you're getting clean data in, clean data out, and you're getting the right ICP profile in. Now they move in the next stage of the funnel, and that is profitability, right? And this is something which is very important, because if your system's broken and you bring in more leads, it's not going to result in more profit. It's going to result in what? More chaos, because you haven't fixed the underlying system, right? And that's where a dashboard is really important. So one of the things we do is create customized dashboards for our clients, and they can see exactly what work's coming in, how much of it is being billed, how much of it is sitting in work in progress, and then how much of it is actually converting into profit. So the one metric that I look at for every law firm across the board is the revenue per lawyer and the cost per lawyer, right? If that metric's not up to the standard that we set, then you will always have a leakage in your law firm. I'll give you an example. So for example, you hire a lawyer for $100,000, per annum. The minimum that lawyer needs to invoice is $300,000. Why? The first $100,000 goes to the lawyer himself. The second $100,000 is consumed in the overheads. You got rent to pay. He needs a new laptop, IT. And the final $100,000 is the actual profit the firm makes off the lawyer, right? So if the lawyer is not bringing in 3.5 times cost to company, then you're actually losing money on that lawyer, right? So we've got a framework where we list all the lawyers, we look at their billable rates, we benchmark them what they need to bill versus what they're actually billing. And you'd be surprised, in a lot of the law firms, all we do is create a feedback mechanism. So we let the lawyers know exactly how much they bill at the end of the month, what was the gap. And all of a sudden, productivity starts to go up, all by creating a simple feedback mechanism.
Yeah. And this basically, the dashboard you're pointing out, this does get connected with all the SaaS tools they're already using, right?
Correct.
Or is it a custom one?
So we normally design custom dashboards, right? Now, the problem for a law firm owner is the data that he or she needs to run the firm resides in separate platforms. So for example, the lead gen data is coming from Google, right? So Google's got its own platform. The operational or the profitability data, how many hours are being billed, what's sitting in unbilled, what's the WIP, that's sitting in the legal software, Smokeball, Leap, Clear, whatever. And what's actually come in terms of cash sitting in an accounting software like Xero or MYOB or QuickBooks. Now, the problem that a law firm owner has, they're sitting in 3 different areas. But when you bring the 3 together in an interconnected form, life becomes a lot simpler. They can see exactly how changing the spend on lead affects profitability, affects cash flow, right? Or if they improve billing rate by 10% for a certain lawyer, how much the cash in bank increases, right? So if you can create a system for the law firm owners that shows all 3 systems in one place, trust me, 90% of the problems are solved. And that's what we do.
Right. And basically, it is, a very good thing because you can see everything. It's just one source of truth for a lot of people to, see. But then, there's one more very important question, which is, I've had good days, right? So I'm going through a really nice time and I'm getting a lot of customers or clients right now. But then when do you suggest that you hire a new attorney or you hire somebody in the staff? Because right now you might have cases going on, but in maybe second quarter or the last quarter, there might not be so many cases on the table, right? So how do they decide that when do they need to make a
When's
new
the right time
hire?
to hire?
Yeah.
That's a tricky one. But there are certain indicators you need to look at. So different law firms go through different seasonalities. For example, family law firms here in Australia, they see a down period December, early Jan, in terms of the work coming in. But guess what? February, you see a spike because over the Christmas, December period, people go on vacation. They decide they want to stay each other. And then you see a spike in inquiries, right? So, and then you see a downturn again, April, May, when school holidays, Easter. So right now is a slower period. So you do see that seasonality. But if you've got your lawyers on an average billing out 90% of their billable time, that shows you're almost at capacity, right? And if you're turning work down, that's also an indicator that you need extra capacity. So what we do is we create a forward-looking profit and loss statement. We add a new lawyer in and we say, look, the first 3 months, the lawyer's not going to be that productive. And then month 4, 5, 6, he or she's going to be 60, 70% productive. And then from their point onward, 90%. So we actually model it out. So we know exactly what month's cash would be low because of that extra cost. So we try and create a system where there are no cash surprises for the law firm owner, right? And that's why I always say, with law firm owners, it's always a visibility problem. Yeah. It's not a motivation problem or anything else. So if they can see their revenue forecast for the next 30, 60, 90 days, they're comfortable in taking that decision. So yes, to answer your question, we look at how busy the current lawyers are and are you turning work down or not? Combination of 2, we then say, look, it's about time you hire the next lawyer.
Right. So basically, this obviously solves that problem. But then you've talked about utilization. Do you have any tips to basically make sure that the utilization is very transparent, and we know that who is working, when he's working, and how much revenue he's actually producing for the company.
So like I said, we've got two metrics to measure utilization. One is 3 to 3.5 times cost to company. Like I mentioned, if someone's costing the company $100,000 per annum, that person needs to be billing between $300,000 and $350,000. That's one metric. The other metric law firms here in Australia use are number of billable hours per day. So at a minimum, a lawyer that's not doing business development work or bringing in work, they need to be doing between 4.5 to 5.5 hours of billables per day. Okay. At bigger firms, it's actually close to 6.5 hours of billables per day. So that's a number they need to. Right. So we take both these numbers and then we take an average, because the 3 times cost to company is on the lower side and the per hour billable day is on the higher side. So we take an average of the two, and that's the budget the lawyer needs to meet. And then if they're meeting that budget, we know that lawyer is productive.
Right. So Imran, one, AI is here, and a lot of people are considering that billable or this model isn't going to work in the future.
Like that's the $1 million question.
Yeah, it's going to go towards the fixed, project or fixed case price, or it could be a value-based pricing. My question is, if that happens, right, or it's already in process, how will this utilization work then? Because obviously, then the other question is, which is very important, like in software development, we have seen that fixed cost projects are usually suffering from undercutting by other software companies, right? So if, let's suppose, in an area there are like 10 family law firms who are reputed, but they go to this fixed price model, and now there's undercutting going on because everybody needs cases, right? So how will that affect a law firm, and how can they battle this out?
See, I understand the analogy you're trying to make, but unfortunately, law firms, you can't compare law firms to software firms, right? Because there are way too many variables for a law firm, right? So if the matter goes to trial, that's a separate story, right? You've got a barrister involved. That's another cost. So, but yes, the things, at least the discussions are heading in that direction. With AI, what used to take a lawyer 2 hours, they can now do it in 10 minutes, right? So do you bill 10 minutes or do you bill 2 hours, right? And lawyers here, they bill in 6-minute increments. So, and that's what most law firms are struggling with. Look, having said that, I work with law firms who do fixed price model, right? So you come in, they'll say, okay, this is what we'll charge you. They divide it into different phases. And I think eventually it will, this is my opinion, I may be wrong, it will move towards a value-based pricing model or a hybrid version of the two, right? So it's not going to be 100% billed per hour. It's not going to be 100% value-based pricing. It's going to be something in the middle. That's how I see it evolving.
Right. And obviously, it's going to have a very profound effect on how.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to change the industry. It's already having a ripple effect.
Yeah, definitely. But then there's a lot of debate on how effective it is, how productive it makes you, or how efficient. But then we're going to come down to that. But I want to, before we move on to this, what would, if I'm a law firm owner and I'm talking to you, what would my success or my law firm success be? Is it like I have a headcount of 5,000 people working for me? Is it the revenue that I'm generating, or what is it for me that I would call that I am successfully running a huge law firm?
Very simple. If you wanted to sell your firm tomorrow, how many buyers would you have standing outside your door, right? You may be successful on paper. Let's say you're turning over above average for your industry. But if you're doing 70-80% of the billing, you're a key person risk. Nobody's going to buy your firm, because if a waste leaves tomorrow, that 70-80% of the billing disappears overnight, right? So this is what I tell law firm owners, right? Keep in mind that in 10 years from now, you want to sell your firm. You don't have to, but that's the goal you're headed, right? So if you put it on the market, people should pay 3-4 times multiple of your profit. So there should not be a key person risk, which means the billing for the principal should not exceed 30-40% max, right? Ideally 20-25%. You should be able to take 2 to 3 long holidays in a year, right? And the firm should still work without you, right? If you can achieve that, what you've actually done is created an asset that creates profit and positive cash flow. If the answers are yes to all this, yes, it can work without you, yes, it's profitable, and yes, it's creating positive cash flow, that is success.
Right. And Imran, a lot of times I think about this, I do understand what you're saying, because obviously when you're running a business, because ultimately, if you are the managing partner or the founder, you have that business, right? If you're running the business, you should not employ yourself into the business. But then
Correct.
you talk about the freedom, right? But then obviously, when I talk to coaches like you, I ask them, how do I have the actual freedom, which a lot of people say financial freedom in that sense. But then in the actual freedom terms, they say you got to build a system. Now, could you
Absolutely.
explain what exactly a system means?
Okay. So if you ever take a transatlantic flight, right? Guess for how many hours is the plane flying on its own versus controlled by the pilot in a modern aircraft?
I think it would be 95% time. It would be this, the autopilot.
Autopilot. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only two times when the pilot's actually involved is during takeoff and landing. Yeah. Once it's at cruising altitude, the autopilot takes over. Yes, the pilot's there making sure everything's running, but the pilot can actually go to the washroom, have lunch, dinner, and come back, and the plane will still be flying, right? And then the pilot would be required during landing. So that's the analogy I use. So if your law firm can run for 90-95% of the times independent of the principal, then you've created an asset that you can monetize, right? So I try and explain to the lawyers, look, you need to disconnect the person from the law firm, right? Because otherwise you've just bought yourself a fancy job, a high-paying job. That's what you've created. Yeah. Freedom comes truly when you have location freedom, time freedom, and cash flow freedom, right? So that can only be created when an asset is producing positive cash flow profitably, independent of the owner. So those three metrics are at a minimum that are required to create that freedom. So, I mean, I know owners who take home $1 million plus, but the problem is the moment they stop working, that $1 million disappears. So like I said, they've actually bought themselves a high-paying job. It's not a business. It's not an asset.
Exactly. But then, Imran, when you should start creating this system? Because for me, if you're just starting out, right, you don't have a lot of cash and spend on industry experts and bring them in to create those systems. You've got to learn that, right?
Absolutely.
But as a lawyer, don't you think it's very hard to create a system where your HR functions like you want it to, or maybe your finance or the admin or the marketing or sales? When you're creating, you yourself don't know a lot of stuff, right? Because
Absolutely.
you have studied law, right? So when you're already cash strapped and you do understand, I got to have a system. So how can I do that?
So ideally, you should have a system the day you start your firm, right? But that generally never happens. So most firms come to us for firefighting. So they come to us either because they're having a cash flow problem or partner stress has gone through the roof. They don't know what to do, right? Or they want to retire in the next 5 to 7 years and they're looking for a planned exit. Generally, those are the three reasons why law firm owners come to us, right? And like they say, all roads lead to Rome. At the end of the day, they need a system, what I call an intelligent system that tells them what to do next, right? Because in bigger firms and corporate firms, you've got a full-time CFO, you've got a full-time practice manager, and they run the show for you, right? Our target clientele are small to medium-sized law firms, right? Where the principal wears multiple hats, right? So in that case, what we do is we create the system for the principal that can assist. And that system can be their fractional practice manager, their fractional CFO. It can actually tell, for example, the systems that we build, the financial side of it will tell the owner that you're going to have a cash flow shortage in 3 months from now when the BAS is due, for example, right? Because a lot of other bills are coming at the same time. So a system that helps make an owner proactive decisions is actually what the owner needs. So in its most rudimentary forms, it can be a bunch of Excel sheets linked together. It doesn't have to be a fancy dashboard. Okay. And I've actually done that for a couple of firms. But eventually they need a system that generate alerts for them, shows them, okay, be aware, you're going to have a cash shortfall in 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. And it tells you, okay, start following up on these overdue clients. If they pay, that problem's solved. So it identifies the problem. It tells them what they need to do next to get rid of the problem. So it's an intelligent decision-making system.
Right. And you talked about, obviously we have that system, but then one of the biggest issues for a law firm is basically cash flow that you mentioned right now, right?
Correct.
So when you look at the law firms audit their cash flow problems, what's going on there?
Like I said earlier, because they can't see the correct information and they reside in 3 different softwares, they don't know what to do. But if you bring the billing cycle, the pipeline strength, and the cash flow lockup, I'll talk more about cash flow lockup, in one place, that's where magic happens. All of a sudden, they can clearly see the problems, right? You got to understand, law firm owners are great lawyers, right? But they're not accountants, or they're not people who are good who are good at forecasting numbers, right? But if you can create a system that allows them to see, they're intelligent people. They can figure out in an instant what needs to happen. So it's bringing that information in a simple dashboard that allows them to make those decisions. That's where the magic happens. Yeah, I'll give you an example. Well, a client came to us for cash flow issues, right? And I said, look, your overdue receivables are out by at least 10 days compared to industry standards. And they go, well, it's only 10 days, big deal. Yeah. And this firm was doing over $1 million in turnover. I said, okay, fine. And so this is a problem. So $1 million, you divide that by 365 days in a year. That's 2,738, I think. Yeah. If they could only improve it by 10 days, so that 2,738 becomes $27,000. So if they could collect their cash only 10 days earlier, which they should because that's their trading conditions, they will have $27,000 sitting in their bank account every month for the next 12 months without increasing a single dollar in revenue. And they go, really? I'm like, yes. And guess what? In the next 2 months, they brought it down, right? And that extra cash appeared in their bank account. So sometimes it's just a matter of showing them, okay, this is what needs to happen. And that problem will disappear.
Exactly. And I think that saves you a lot from the stress of, actually, you don't know exactly what's going to happen if you don't have numbers, right? And
Correct.
I see a lot of lawyers in stress that what they're going to do in next month or in next 3 months or 6 months. And that's a pretty, very, very, it's connected to your emotion, mental health and everything, right?
Absolutely.
So this uncertainty, right? When we see that, what's really triggering them, right? So apart from what I mentioned, that what the cash flow issue, probably the salary issue that we have to pay people this month or next month, right?
Yes.
But then how to deal with this kind of stress when already they're coming to you for firefighting? So obviously do you help them overturn this in a couple of days, a couple of months, and during that time what's happening really to the partners?
So the analogy that I like to use is you go to your GP, right? And you tell your GP, this is my blood report. He says, oh, you've got high blood pressure, you've got high cholesterol, right? All of a sudden your stress level goes up even more, right? But what the GP does is he or she will give you a plan. Okay, start taking this medication. Come see me again in a fortnight and we'll retest, right? So they put a plan in place, right? They put a disease management plan in place. So what we do is we put a financial improvement plan in place, right? It's not guesswork. It's actual numbers. So I tell them, if we improve this is how much extra cash will be in bank, down to the dollar, right? So it's not gut feel. It's not, oh, will it improve? Will it not improve? I tell them exactly how much it will improve, right? All they got to do is follow the steps, follow the bouncing ball, as they say, right? So my role is more of a fractional GM / fractional CFO, right? And in terms of telling them, okay, these are the steps that need to happen. In general, it takes us between 10 to 12 weeks to bring about a meaningful improvement in cash flow, right? So if they're already struggling, which means those bad habits are well entrenched or they're not monitoring the right KPIs. So to turn it around, it generally takes us 10 to 12 weeks. Provided they follow intelligently. Look, I meet with my clients weekly. So I tell them, you're only 6 days away from making a wrong decision. So just wait and talk to me before you actually take a decision.
Yeah. And I think 10 to 12 weeks is, going through this process is better than, struggling for next 10 years and having all of that.
Cost of inaction, right? So you can, if you're overweight, for example, you can go, you can choose to go see a nutritionist or just continue on your present lifestyle, right? It's up to you. It's always about choices.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And then, Imran, I'm gonna, talk about a little bit more on towards a different side, because I have seen lawyers get really motivated to buy something because of FOMO. They see other firms doing it. And then they're also motivated, oh, I see my friend lawyer or my competitor making YouTube shorts or videos or going on TikTok live or something like that. I should start doing it. And then what they see is, oh, my videos are getting like 10 views. My paper is not being downloaded by a lot of people. I don't think so it's working, right? So when it comes to the motivation in terms of marketing or sales or any other function that you've talked about, is motivation the right word or something that we need to look for, or is it discipline that you need to follow when you're starting out or doing something new in your firm?
Look, both motivation and discipline are required to move anything forward in life. Doesn't matter if it's a law firm or any other business, right? Those two are like prerequisites to move anything forward. But then you got to have someone advising you whether that's the right direction you're going. So for example, do you spend money on Google Ads or do you spend money creating TikTok videos? Where is your ICP residing? Who's watching? Right? I'll give you an example. For example, family law firm owners, they get a higher return on investment on Google Ads versus any other form of marketing. And there's a reason behind it. If someone's going through a difficult life personally, they're not going to ask their friends, oh, do you need a good family lawyer? They're going to be discreet about it. They're going to go on Google and ask, okay, who's a good family lawyer in my area? Versus if I'm trying to open a new business, I'm going to ask my friends, hey, do you know a good commercial lawyer? So you got to understand where the leads are flowing from, because family lawyers, they deal with personal stuff. Nobody wants to talk about personal stuff with their friends and families. They will search for it online. So, and cost per lead for family law firms is much higher compared to, for example, commercial law firms, right? So you got to understand why that's the case. So there are different. So for example, I've got someone in the wills and estates arena, right? Now, in Australia, if you join a networking group, the return on investment is quite good. So sometimes all you got to do is join a good networking group in your area, and you'll start seeing results. So it depends what law you're practicing and where the leads are being generated. That doesn't mean you're not going to get wills and estates leads on Google, right? But you always look at the return on investment per channel, right? And I always advise my clients, you should have an offline strategy as well as an online strategy, right? Because any bumps along the way get smoothed out if you have two sources of leads coming in.
Yeah, exactly. To find, I think, people who are going through a difficult life crisis right now, you wouldn't be actually spending money on some conference, right? You would want to, show your ads.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing. But then, these days, obviously, the competition is so much and you have to stand out. Now, what I think, and I might be wrong, but in terms of SEO, your presence, like your video presence, is very, very important these days. Because if people see you answering their questions on a video, they start connecting with you emotionally as well. So if they had to pick somebody who's familiar or somebody who's not, obviously they're going to go with somebody who they've already heard about or listened to. So how important is that the founders or managing partners start going on podcast if they can't shoot their own videos, or at least start making some videos on their own, put them on their website or YouTube or LinkedIn, just to be visible to the public? So
look, what lands you deals is trust, right? And being visible is the first step in creating trust. Like, why would anybody trust me, right? I remember I was talking to a commercial lawyer once upon a time, and I was explaining to him what I did, and he goes, "Are you a lawyer?" I'm like, "No." And he goes, "How can you help law firms then? You're not a lawyer." And I go, "That's precisely the reason I can help law firms, because I'm not a lawyer." And then I explained to that person exactly what I did. And guess what? I got a client out of him after a few weeks, because getting that trust is the most important thing. And there are multiple avenues. So for example, we used to work with a solo practitioner. She was a family law practitioner. And all she did was answer questions on these Facebook groups, single moms or something like that, right? That's all she did. So people would ask her basic questions and she would answer. And then if they wanted legal advice, she would say, "Oh, come see me." So she generated a lot of work by just answering questions on Facebook groups. That's how she gained her trust. So I think in today's world, video is the most effective way of generating trust, right, in your area. And if you can leverage that, absolutely. The return on that is definitely worth it. But you got to be consistent. That's the other thing I see. People do 1 or 2 videos and then they leave it. Okay, the key is consistency. You got to keep doing it week after week, month after month.
In fact, Imran, in my experience, I think when I started making videos, I got initially a really good traction. It was like 2 years back when I would just put out whatever I was reading and I would tell people, this is the book I've read, you should do it. And I remember I was getting like 50, 60 views on every video. But then after like few months, I lost the motivation and then I stopped completely. Now that I've started again, obviously I'm talking about a different thing, but I don't see that traction going on because obviously Google algorithm learns. Now I have to make the same amount of videos at least for the algorithm to train to who to show my videos to. So I think it's a disastrous effect if you're not consistent enough. If you're consistent, you're going to see every day.
The start-stop thing is the worst thing you can do. So
and same goes for, I think, So sorry to cut you off. I just want to
Yeah,
add
sure.
here, and I think in your experience, it would be the same thing you would do to your ad account. Like you start showing ads, and then while it's learning, you think, okay, it's not converting. I'm going to stop it, right? So,
100%.
what is your take on that?
No, absolutely. So consistency is the number one thing. So doesn't matter what channel you're utilizing to get to your ICP, you have to be consistent, right? So for example, that lady, she was consistent in answering questions, right? So if video is your mode, then you need to be consistent in making sure you're producing quality videos, you're producing valuable content, and then eventually it will compound over time, right? So the problem is in today's day and age, people want instant results, instant coffee. You want instant gratification. It doesn't happen. So you need to put in, you're in it for the long haul. You need to put in the hours to make sure that you are producing that content consistently. Because if not, it's just going to go down the drain.
Exactly. And I think if you are not an entertainer, you don't have to be viral. Because ultimately, even if 10 people who are your correct ICP are watching you, that is better than 1,000 people watching you, and they're not even, they can never be your clients, right? So I don't think that people should get discouraged. Yeah,
absolutely. So there's a lady on LinkedIn, for example. She deals in agricultural research and helping farmers, right? Now I just follow her, and she's never gone viral, right? So she'll get 300-400 views, right? But the amount of work she generates through LinkedIn, it's crazy because only her ideal clients are watching her content, right? They may be in the few hundreds, but they're converting because the value she's giving for them is really high, right? So you don't have to go viral to generate revenue through online platforms like LinkedIn or anything. You just have to be consistent in giving that information to your targeted potential clients, right? So as long as you're doing that consistently, work's going to come to you.
And what do you think about a lot of lawyers have this, also they see other people posting like every single day, and they're thinking, how do they generate so much content every single day? And probably this is what I need to do as well. I need to post every single day. Do you think that works? Or
no. So you got to go back and realize and understand where your ICP sits. How are you getting your money in, right? So if it's through Google ads, if it's through Meta ads, if it's through whatever it is, you got to run the numbers on it, because at the end of the day, you have to calculate the return on investment on every dollar spent on marketing, right? So I'll give you an example. We had a law firm, again, a family law firm. They were spending close to, 10-15 grand on radio ads, right? And we tried to come up with a way to measure how many people are coming in because of those radio ads. We couldn't. And I said at the end of the day, look, if we were to spend this on Google ads, for example, we know for a fact X number of new prospects were going to come in, right? Whereas with these radio ads, maybe people were coming in, but we didn't know. We couldn't put a number to it. So at the end of the day, we got rid of the radio ads and we spent half the amount on Google ads, and it just brought in the number. So it just brings certainty, right? Did the numbers drop after stopping the radio ads? No. So just because someone else is doing radio ads doesn't mean you have to do radio ads. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it boils down to knowing where your ICP sits and what's the best and most efficient way in reaching the target audience.
Yeah, and I think this is the way most of the marketers start with. They basically put your budget into different platforms and then see which is converting the most. And then obviously they have like 70 to 80% budget. They move towards the one that is converting, and then still they test with a little budget on different platforms to see if something converts.
You have to keep testing and trialing. Yes.
Yeah, you can't just blindly put everything everywhere. You have to focus on one platform that converts really, really well for you. But then test other ones. Maybe if something goes down, you have to, pivot to that. But you see, when it comes down to everything in our whole conversation, what I've learned is, Imran, from you, that everything comes down to one particular thing, and that is numbers and data.
Absolutely.
If you're not data backed, you cannot make any sane decision, right? So, if you have any other advice for the managing partners or my audience, what that might be?
Look, know your numbers, right? You should know what your break even is. You should know what your monthly revenue is going to be for the next 3 months, and you should know what your cash in bank would be in the next 3 months. If you don't know those 3 numbers, then you need to sit down with your finance person or whoever you work with and figure out a way that those 3 numbers can be communicated to you every single month, right? Because if you can only take a decision if you know something, right? If I don't know what my cholesterol levels are, right? I'm not going to change my lifestyle, am I?
Yeah.
So knowing your numbers is the first thing. And then the second thing is knowing what to do with that is step number 2, right? So if my cholesterol is high and then I go to a specialist or a GP, they tell me, okay, cut down on red meat, do this, do this, do this, and come see me again in a month's time. So same thing with law firms. If your work in progress is too high, or if your cash lockup is too high, we tell them, okay, do this, do this, do this. And instead of 1 month later, we check it the next week. So the turnaround time in this industry is much quicker. So, and look, you make 1% improvement every day. That's a 37% improvement in a year compounded. That's the philosophy that we work with.
Right. Now, Imran, in the last segment, I want to talk about the time value, right? Because a lot of lawyers would rather spend their time on doing stuff which probably somebody can do better, right?
Absolutely.
So, first of all, how do you basically calculate the value of their time, and then how do they know that which function should I, take or solve myself, or problem that I can solve, and which I can delegate? So, what do you think on that?
So for law firm, it's really simple, because these lawyers, they've got an hourly rate. So for example, a family law principal charges anywhere between $600 to $650 an hour here in Australia. So I say, okay, is this task that you're doing worth $600 or $650 an hour? And if the answer is no, then I said delegate it, right? So it becomes really easy. If the dollar value of your time is not commensurate with the task that you're doing, you need to either delegate it or find someone who can actually do it at a much lower rate. So, and that way, once you, and if you can train lawyers to think like that, you put the very foundations to create a very efficient law firm, because that's how they're going to think, right? Should I spend my time doing this? Oh, is it worth my time? No. Okay, delegate, right? So at the end of the day, for the principal, very few things will be left on the table that are worth the principal's time.
Right. Exactly. And this is one of those things which, I see a lot, and you might have noticed this as well. Whenever, like for example, if I put a free guide on the Google Click ID thing, and I was talking to this person, he said, you know what, you are charging a lot for this. I could just ask ChatGPT and he's going to give me all the steps to do it. And then I'm going to do it on my own. Why should I pay you a $2,000 for this, right? And I was like, okay, sure. I think that's the best way if you can do this, because obviously ChatGPT can code everything. It can actually tell you everything. But then, are you sure you want to do this? Because you would be spending like 4 or 5 hours on the same thing. So the math doesn't make sense to me, right?
Absolutely.
So do you also find people saying that to you, like, okay, we have to build the data pipeline or something, a revenue pipeline? I could just ask GPT. Why should I ask Imran for that?
Yeah, good luck. No problem. It's going to take them 10 times more time to do the same thing that I do in 10 minutes. Yeah, because I've been doing it over and over and over and over again for the last 20 years. So I've become really skilled at my craft, right? Similarly, for lawyers, they are extremely skilled at their craft. I mean, I could probably train to become a lawyer. It'll take me, 4, 5, 6 years. I'll eventually get my degree. But is it worth my time? Probably not. So the way to improve anything is to stick to what you're good at, right? And find people. And if you've got a problem, find people who are good at solving that problem. Yes, they probably pay me $2,000, $3,000 a month. But I always say, look at the value proposition. So it's very simple. I define value as what you pay, you put it in the numerator, divided by what you get, right? So as long as that number is profitable or it's greater than 1, because what you are paying to that person is very clear, right? So someone pays me $2,000, they can put that. And what they get out of me, they can actually quantify it. So in 6 to 8 weeks, I can show my clients, this was your revenue, this was your profitability, and this was your cash in bank. Fast forward 6 to 8 weeks, I show them these are the 3 metrics. Fast forward another 8 to 10 weeks, these are your metrics. Yeah. So they can actually see what they got out after engaging with me. Yeah. Could they have done it on their own? Absolutely. Right. But the fact that they couldn't move the needle on their own for so many years, they engaged a specialist. Right. Why do people hire a gym coach? Right. You can go to the gym and work out on your own, but why do you hire a gym coach? Because that person's got specialist knowledge, right? They know what muscle groups to work on. They will keep you accountable, right? So knowledge plus accountability is what actually moves the needle forward in anything in life.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and obviously you can't hold ChatGPT accountable, because he's just going to say
ChatGPT
every single time. Yeah, oops. That's exactly what happened. In fact, I'll just give you my own example, right? So initially when I started my own firm, so I believed that I have to do SEO. I remember ChatGPT telling me that you got to make city-wise pages, you got to make this. And I felt like, oh, this is great advice, because I never thought about it. So I kept on doing it on my own. And then it was not converting, right? when I hired the first person, right, the actual SEO person for my office, we were doing a lot of client work. So obviously I couldn't handle it. So I hired that person and he said, you know what, your own SEO it's absolutely wrong because you are dealing with US and Canada and you're not a local business. So basically you don't need city-wise or neighborhood-wise pages. And that's all the wasted effort that I had spent so much time. And I could have actually found more clients at that using the same amount of time. So coming to this, when somebody approaches you, right? So if somebody's listening right now, they want to approach Imran. Do you charge anything for consultation initially?
No, so we do give 2 free sessions. So in the first session, I understand what their pain points are, what are they struggling with, right? And in that session, I would normally ask for advisor access to their accounting software. I'd go back and run my numbers on our proprietary tools. It's called a business health check. So it'll tell them exactly where they are, where they should be, and what the gap is. So for example, if they're billing X amount, they should be billing X plus 40%. I will show them which lawyer is making the budget, which lawyer is not making the budget, what is their cash position in the bank, what it should be based on their trading conditions. So I actually create a full health check for them. And I present that report in our second meeting. And then I say, look, this is where the gaps are. You can go back and fix the gaps on your own. No problems. Because at least now they know where the problem exists. Or you can work with me and I can help you achieve the same result in probably half the time. So my concept is that I'm never a burden on their P&L. I'm always a positive ROI investment. So if they spend $2,000 with me, they're going to get a return of $4,000 to $6,000 on my investment.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah. And that's what eventually matters, right? It's the return on investment. And when you get the clients, obviously the return of investment. If you're getting good clients, right, who stay with you for a longer period of time, obviously their lifetime value would increase or have a compounding effect on your ROI. It's not just one
I've got
thing.
Clients who've been with us for 4+ years and they just want to keep working with us.
Yeah, exactly. So all those listening, I just want to basically tell everybody that it's not, rather than asking or wasting time on ChatGPT, ask an actual person who's giving you free advice and you can actually hold them accountable as well, right?
Absolutely.
And it costs you nothing. Like it costs you nothing, but it's costing that person his time that he's basically giving you for free, and that's immense value for any person, right? Who's expert in his field, right? So Imran, I think this has been such a valuable conversation, and I'm really sorry. I wanted to dig deep on a lot of things, to be honest, but I couldn't because of the short of time. I would love to invite you, and we would then talk about firms with respect to their size and their capacity. So that would be a great topic because I just want to know exactly what would be the strategies for a solo attorney or a small firm, a boutique firm, mid-size, and every different sector is different, right? So thanks for coming to my show. It was a pleasure having you. If there's something I missed and you want to, tell my audience, you have the floor.
No. Really appreciate you inviting me, Wes. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while, and I really like the way you conduct your podcasts, and they're quite insightful. And look, like I said, at the end of the day, any firm owner needs to know their numbers, right? And the problem is those numbers that actually matter sit in different softwares, different tools. And if you can get someone to show them to you, life becomes a lot simpler. So that would be my 2 cents.
That's great. So that would be it for this podcast. Hopefully you liked it and learned that
it was amazing.
Data and numbers is everything. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.